There is a specific moment, and researchers at the University of Chicago actually identified it, when your brain stops treating money like a threat. Not gradually, not slowly over years of discipline and savings accounts and budget spreadsheets. There is a distinct shift, a rewiring, and the people on the other side of it don't just have more money. They experience money differently. They make decisions differently. They sleep differently. Most people never reach it. Not because they aren't smart enough, not because they didn't work hard enough, but nobody ever explained to them what's actually happening inside their own mind every time they check their bank balance. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what separates those people from everyone else. And more importantly, you'll understand that the gap is not as wide as you think it is. I want to tell you about a man named Marcus. Marcus was 41 years old. He had a good job, a decent salary, a family he loved. On paper, things looked fine. But Marcus had a habit he'd never told anyone about. Every time he was about to check his bank account at the grocery store, filling up gas, sitting in a drive-thru, he'd pause, just for a second. And in that second, there was this low, cold feeling in his chest. Don't panic. Not quite. Just this quiet, steady dread. He wasn't broke. He wasn't behind on bills. But he was always exactly one unexpected thing away from feeling like everything was falling apart. A car repair, a medical bill, a slow month. That was all it took. He told himself it was just being responsible, staying alert, that people who didn't feel this way were just reckless or lucky or already wealthy. He figured that's just what money felt like for most people. He was wrong about that. And the day Marcus understood why he was wrong, not just intellectually, but actually felt it shift, that was the day everything started to change. Let me show you what was actually happening inside Marcus's mind, because this is where it gets interesting. In 2013, two researchers, Senthil Mullainathan at Harvard and Eldar Shafir at Princeton, published a study on what they called the bandwidth tax. The idea is this: when your mind is preoccupied with financial stress, it doesn't just feel bad, it consumes cognitive resources. Real measurable resources. The study found that people experiencing significant financial anxiety performed the equivalent of 13 IQ points lower on standard cognitive tests, not because they were less intelligent, because their mental bandwidth was already being used up, constantly running background calculations about money, worst-case scenarios, what-ifs, contingencies. Think about what 13 IQ points actually means. That's the difference between a clear, confident decision and one made under pressure. That's the difference between seeing an opportunity and being too mentally exhausted to act on it. Marcus wasn't anxious about money because he had money problems. He had money problems in part because he was anxious about money. The anxiety was the tax, and it was collecting every single day. Now here's the second piece, and this one goes even deeper. In the 1970s, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky identified something they called loss aversion. The basic finding is that losses feel roughly twice as painful as equivalent gains feel good. Losing $100 is psychologically about twice as bad as winning $100 feels. That asymmetry is built into how human brains evolved. For most of human history, losses of food, shelter, and safety were potentially fatal. Gains were nice, but not urgent. The problem is that this ancient wiring is still running in your brain right now. Every time you look at your account and it's lower than you expected, your brain registers something close to a physical threat. Every time a bill comes in higher than planned, your nervous system responds to it the way your ancestors responded to a predator moving in the grass. You cannot think your way out of this response. It is automatic. It is biological. But here's what the research shows about the people who seem financially calm, financially confident, and financially free. They didn't somehow override this response. They built lives in which the response gets triggered less often. They didn't change their feelings. They changed the conditions. And that difference between trying to feel less afraid versus building a life where there's less to be afraid of, that is the core of everything. There's a third concept, and this one ties the others together. Researchers studying long-term wealth accumulation consistently find that the most durable predictor of financial well-being isn't income or investment returns or even savings rate. It's identity. Specifically, whether someone has built an internal identity, a self-concept, around a particular set of financial behaviors, independent of outcomes. Warren Buffett put it a different way. He said he doesn't look to jump over 7-foot bars. He looks around for 1-foot bars he can step over. And he said that casually in an interview as if it were obvious. But what he was describing is a trained mind. A mind that stopped treating money like a test it might fail and started treating it like a system it could design. That's the shift. That is what the University of Chicago researchers were pointing at. It's not a number in a bank account. It's a reorganization of how the brain categorizes money from threat to tool. From something that happens to you to something you operate. And it is absolutely something you can build. Before we get to exactly how Marcus built it and the 3-step framework behind it, I want to take 1 second. If what we're talking about is landing for you, if you're recognizing something in Marcus's story or in the way your own brain works around money, hit subscribe. Because next week we're covering the single habit that kept Buffett's net worth compounding through every market crash of the last 50 years. Not the investing strategy, the mental habit underneath it. You'll want to see that one. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and let's keep going. Marcus did 3 things, not overnight, not all at once. But he did 3 specific things that over the following 8 months moved him from that low dread in the Costco parking lot to something he described as, and I want to use his exact words here, a kind of quiet I didn't know I was allowed to have. The first thing he did was what I call the anxiety audit. 1 night a week, Marcus sat down with a blank piece of paper and wrote down every financial fear that had crossed his mind that week. Not a budget, not a spreadsheet, just fears. The car is making a noise, and I don't know what it'll cost. We haven't saved enough for the kids' school. The market dropped, and I don't know if I should move something. What if I lose my job? He wrote all of it down, every single thing. And then next to each one, he wrote 2 letters, either C for control or N for not, in my control. That's it. That's the whole exercise. What happened over the following weeks surprised him. First, the list got shorter. When you commit a fear to paper, your brain registers that it's been acknowledged, and the background processing slows down. The bandwidth tax starts to drop. Second, he realized that roughly 70% of what was consuming his mental energy fell in the end column, not in his control. He was spending the majority of his cognitive bandwidth on things he could not affect. The anxiety audit didn't solve his money problems, but it dramatically reduced the bandwidth tax, and that freed up cognitive space for the second step. The second thing Marcus did was what I call the identity spend. Once a month, just once, Marcus made one deliberate financial decision that was connected not to where he was, but to who he wanted to become. Not a big purchase, not a dramatic gesture. Something small that had meaning attached to it. He opened a brokerage account and transferred $50 into an index fund. He didn't have a plan yet. He didn't know exactly what he was doing. But he did it. And then he sat with the feeling of having done it, of being someone who had a brokerage account, of being someone who invested. This is what Charlie Munger meant when he talked about building systems over chasing outcomes. Marcus wasn't trying to get rich from $50. He was building an internal narrative, a self-concept. Each small action reinforced the identity, and the identity made the next action easier. Behavioral researchers call this the identity-behavior loop. You don't act yourself into a new identity by thinking about it, you act. And then you adjust who you believe yourself to be, to match what you just did. Do enough of those small actions, and the identity becomes load-bearing. It starts to hold the behaviors up instead of the behaviors having to fight the identity every single time. The third thing Marcus did was what I call the automation wall. He sat down one afternoon and made a list of every active financial decision he was making on a recurring basis. Every time he had to consciously decide whether to transfer to savings, whether to pay a bill, or whether to move money. And one by one, he automated them. Automatic transfer to savings on the first of every month. Automatic investment contribution, small but consistent. Automatic bill payments were set up so that the anxiety trigger of seeing a bill arrive was removed from the sequence entirely. Here's the thing that surprised Marcus most about this step. He didn't feel less in control than before. He felt more in control because he understood what the research shows, that willpower is not a character trait. It's a cognitive resource. And like every cognitive resource, it depletes. Every financial decision that requires active willpower is a small withdrawal, from an account that has a daily limit. The wealthiest people don't have more willpower. They have fewer decisions. The automation wall wasn't about removing Marcus from his finances. It was about removing the constant low-grade decision fatigue that was wearing him down every single week, in ways he didn't even fully realize until it stopped. 6 months later, Marcus told me something I've thought about a lot since. He said, "I can't remember the last time I felt that thing in the parking lot." Not because he was rich. He wasn't. Not because his problems had gone away. Some of them hadn't. But because his brain had started to reclassify money. Not as a threat requiring constant monitoring, as a system he was quietly operating. That's not a financial transformation, that's a neurological one. I want you to sit on something before we close. The people who never worry about money, and I mean the ones who genuinely don't, not the ones who pretend, weren't built differently. They didn't start with more. They didn't have some gene for financial confidence that you're missing. They started practicing a different relationship with money, in most cases just a little earlier than everyone else. They started building the audit habit or the identity actions or the automation systems before they had a lot to protect. And because they started early, the wiring had time to settle. The identity had time to become load-bearing. The brain had time to reclassify. You just spent the last 13 minutes doing exactly that. Not metaphorically. The act of understanding the bandwidth tax changes how much bandwidth it consumes. The act of naming loss aversion means the next time your stomach drops over a financial number, some part of your brain will recognize it as a known pattern rather than a fresh emergency. The act of hearing Marcus's story gives you a model, an internal reference point for what the other side looks like. This is compound wisdom, not compound interest. Compound understanding. It builds slowly. It doesn't always look like progress in the moment, but over time it changes the architecture of how you think. And the architecture is what determines the outcomes. Now, there's something I didn't get to in this video, intentionally. There is a fourth element to what Marcus did. And honestly, it might be the most important one, because without it, the first three tend to erode over time. Researchers who study habit formation call it intentional friction. It's a method of engineering your own environment so that your best financial behaviors happen automatically and your worst ones require effort. It's subtle, it's counterintuitive, and it's the reason some people maintain financial clarity for decades while others make progress for 6 months and then slide back. That's next week. Subscribe if you haven't already, and it'll land right in your feed when it goes up. And while you're here, I've left the compound interest calculator we built in the comments below. Run your own numbers. Because seeing the maths on your specific situation is different from understanding the maths in theory. It lands differently. That's the whole point of this channel. Understanding land differently when it's yours.